I used to think our money felt tighter because life was simply getting more expensive. Groceries, bills, and small needs kept adding up in ways that felt reasonable. I didn't question it because everything looked normal from the outside. Then I noticed something I had never really paid attention to before. It wasn't a big expense or anything newly added, just small amounts leaving quietly, almost unnoticed. The numbers were small enough that I never felt their absence. They blended into everything else we spent, but they kept showing up, month after month. One evening, I added everything together without rushing. The total surprised me more than I expected. We were paying for things we weren't even using anymore. That was when something became clear to me. Money doesn't always slip away because of new choices. Sometimes it stays tied to old ones we never paused to revisit. I woke up a little earlier than usual that morning. The house was still quiet, and I moved through the kitchen without thinking too much. It felt like I was following a rhythm I had known for years. Armin sat quietly with his coffee, not saying much. Mira moved around, looking for her ribbon, slightly rushed but used to it. Mornings always passed like this, quick and familiar. After they left, the house returned to its quiet state. I moved from one small task to another without stopping. The silence felt full, not empty. While ironing Mira's uniform, I played a series on my tablet. It used to be something I looked forward to. Now it just filled the background. There was a meal planning app still on my phone. I remembered when I first downloaded it with good intentions. Now I couldn't even recall the password. Mira once used her learning app almost every day. Now she reached more often for her drawing book instead. I hadn't really noticed when that changed. Armand still had an active gym membership. His card sat in his wallet, rarely touched. Life had quietly rearranged his time. None of it felt unusual at the time. The payments continued on their own, quietly in the background, and I slowly stopped noticing them. The end of the month always arrives with a familiar feeling. I notice how quickly the money seems to fade without anything unusual happening. It leaves me quietly wondering where it all went. That night, I sit at the dining table with my notebook open. I try to understand why this month feels heavier than usual. It doesn't match how we've been spending. I open my bank account and scroll slowly. Small charges appear across different dates. None of them feel important on their own. One is for streaming, another for a family app, and then a membership I barely think about anymore. Then I notice more. Another charge, and another one. Each of them feels strangely familiar. I start adding everything together carefully. The small numbers begin to form something larger. It surprises me how much they become. I pause for a moment and look again. Many of these aren't even part of our daily life anymore, yet they continue quietly in the background. It feels uncomfortable to realize this. We've been paying for a version of life that no longer fits us, and somehow we never noticed until now. The next day, I started paying closer attention. A streaming app I barely opened still billed us quietly. It felt strange seeing something active that we no longer used. I found the meal planner subscriptions still active. These days, I cooked from simple recipes I already knew. I couldn't remember the last time I relied on it. Mira's learning app was still deducting money. She had already moved on to using her workbook. I realized I hadn't checked it in months. Armand's gym membership was still running. His shoes sat untouched near the door. Life had quietly shifted, but the payments hadn't. I began to understand something clearly. Many of our financial decisions belonged to a different time, and we had never paused to revisit them. None of the amounts felt alarming on their own. They were small enough to ignore, but together they quietly took their space. Part of me tried to justify it. Maybe we would use them again someday. Maybe it still made sense to keep them. But the truth felt simple when I sat with it. We were paying for possibilities, not reality. And over time, that quietly became expensive. That night felt simple and warm in a quiet way. We sat together with homemade popcorn, nothing special, but enough. I noticed how rare these small moments had become. When the app opened, something felt slightly off. Armand paused, trying to remember the password. It had been that long since we used it. We laughed, but it didn't fully settle inside me. The laughter felt light, yet it left something behind. I started to notice the gap between paying and using. Mira's voice came in simply, without hesitation. She asked something we hadn't stopped to ask ourselves, and her question stayed longer than expected. Children often see things without layers. They don't add reasons or soften the truth. That clarity can feel unexpectedly sharp. The question followed me even after the moment passed. It echoed quietly while I moved through small tasks. I couldn't easily dismiss it. I realized it wasn't about needing those things anymore. We just never stopped them. The habit continued quietly without attention. In that moment, something became clear without force. The quiet subscriptions felt heavier than they should. Not because of cost, but because of what they represented. I gave it a name so I could finally see it clearly. A quiet audit of money leaving without intention. It felt small, but it mattered more than I expected. I started listing everything that renews on its own, one by one, without skipping anything. It felt like opening drawers I hadn't checked in years. The list kept growing longer than I thought it would. Not because we had too much, but because we never paused. Life had moved, and we didn't notice. Buying wasn't the real problem. Forgetting to review was. Needs change quietly, and we rarely sit with them long enough to notice. Money should follow who we are now, not who we used to be. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. I used to think budgeting was only about what we choose to spend, but there's another side that quietly continues, and it deserves just as much attention. Sometimes the weight isn't from something new. It comes from things that stayed too long, even after they stopped being useful. For the first time, I looked at our money without assumptions. Not just where it went today, but where it kept going quietly. That night, I sat beside Armand without rushing. We opened our shared account quietly, almost like opening a drawer we had ignored. I felt a mix of curiosity and readiness. We asked simple questions, one by one. Is this still used? Does this still matter? The answers didn't come fast, but they felt honest. When the answer felt unclear, we didn't debate it. We took it as a quiet signal. Maybe it no longer belonged in our life. One by one, we let things go. A streaming service, a couple of apps, a membership paused. It felt quieter with each decision. Each cancellation didn't feel like much on its own. But when we saw the total, we paused. It was more than we expected. I started a small ritual at the beginning of each month. Just 15 quiet minutes, sitting down, looking again, not to control everything tightly, just to stay aware of where things were going, so our money could follow our life, not the past. It felt lighter than I expected, like clearing a space that had been quietly full. Not empty, just more intentional. The next month felt quieter in a way I didn't expect. Nothing new came in, yet something unnecessary had stopped leaving. I noticed the difference in small, almost invisible ways. At the end of the month, the numbers finally made sense. I didn't have to guess where things went anymore. There was a quiet clarity I could follow. I moved a small amount into savings without hesitation. It wasn't extra money, just money that stayed. That felt more meaningful than earning more. Armin mentioned the house felt different. Not fuller, just easier to breathe in. I realized it wasn't about money, but about knowing. I felt lighter doing the same routines as before. Nothing had changed on the surface, but I was no longer carrying what I didn't see. Mira started noticing small habits without being told. She watched more than she asked. I saw her learning in quiet ways. I used to think managing money meant holding back. Now it felt more like letting go of what no longer fits. That shift made everything simpler. I understand now that even quiet weight is still weight. It doesn't need to be loud to matter. And noticing it changes everything. I used to think our money disappeared because everything kept getting more expensive. But slowly, I began to notice something quieter behind it. Some of it was simply habits that never got updated. It wasn't always about sudden spending or careless decisions. Sometimes it was the things we forgot we were still paying for. Quiet subscriptions that stayed long after their purpose faded. Life had moved forward in ways I didn't fully realize. Our needs had quietly shifted without announcement. But our spending was still following an older version of us. Taking time to review things didn't feel like restriction anymore. It felt like finally paying attention to what matters. Awareness brought a kind of quiet clarity I didn't expect. Now I see money a little differently than before. It's not about how much stays, but why it stays. And that quiet understanding feels more steady than any number.